Discussion podcast. This week we have Kit Grande on. He is Realisation Designer at Ubisoft. Dude, thanks so much for coming on.
No worries. It's cool to be here.
So, I was checking out your portfolio, and I speak to people a lot about like development and career development, and something that I've tend to have noticed is people will start in sort of asset art, prop art, and as they evolve, it scales up, and by scaling up, it naturally becomes environment art. You kind of started in environment art, and you've naturally transferred it to a more focused weapon realization designer. Like that was an intentional thing for you?
Yeah, well, like what happened was I got an internship at UB Montpellier as a marketing artist while I was at uni. So I went over there from Leicester over to Montpellier in south of France, and I spent 6 months as like taking screenshots of Assassin's Creed games and Valiant Hearts and stuff. And that gave me a bit of like compositional knowledge and helped out a lot. But the goal was still to be an environment artist. And I was like, that's what my goal is. And coming out of uni at that time, there was no real, it was, 6 years ago, 2015, 2014 type time. Like there was no, it wasn't as common to divide things between props and environment. It was like, as an environment artist, you're expected to make props. You're expected to make materials. Like that's just, they go together. Now things are a bit more specialized, but at the time, it wasn't as common for those to be specialized. So yeah, the goal was just like, there are more environment artists positions available. And I didn't really have any other goals. I was just like, environment art, get a job straight out. And so yeah, I left uni to work at Dambuster Studios while we were finishing Homefront. So I got the tail end of Homefront: The Revolution and all 3 of the DLCs. And so during that time, that's when I actually discovered the other sides of the art pipelines. I knew that character art was something super cool, but just wasn't quite for me. But I actually did end up working with weapons and vehicles. Pika Selva, he's an incredible artist, and I worked with him to like bug fix, LOD, basically all the work that no one wants to do. Like there was a helicopter that I'd spent like, I don't know, 3 weeks just reducing the try count of this thing to make it fit in the game. And on that, I got to make a couple of small bits and pieces for weapons and really enjoyed the hard surface modeling stuff. I also got to make a baseball bat, which was like used in a cinematic, and that was the first thing I was given on Homefront. They were like, "Hey, can you make a baseball bat?" And I just went a bit extra with it. I just went a bit too far. Like they were just expecting like a standard, like wooden baseball bat, and I had a tape and I did all these extra crazy things, and it's like I really enjoyed that side of it. And when it came to placing assets and doing your squares, your like sections of the map, like that drained me quite a lot because I don't know how to describe the differences, but trying to tell a story in an environment with like Lego pieces sounds pretty fun, and it is kind of cool, and sometimes I like it, but it wasn't the thing that I wanted to be doing all the time. So yeah, throughout Homefront, I basically got the opportunity to work with character art as well and make some skins, and not the faces, no actual characters, but just like assets to be added on. And so from there, like I got the opportunity to make more guns, and I was going to be working on the next project with them, and ended up being like personal work was basically just making weapons because I wanted to get good enough to be a weapon artist in the studio. And then I came over here to Barcelona to work at UB on Rainbow, and that was kind of like, it was a choice that I wanted to be a weapon artist because that would mean I would get to be doing hard surface modeling regularly, like super detail focused, like sit in the corner and just like work on stuff that most people won't see, but some people will really enjoy, like it's it was a bit of a like passion, those details, those excesses. So yeah.
But so with that then, okay, this is a question I wanted to ask for a long time. Like, what the fuck is a realization designer? Like, I have never heard this term until I see you post it, And I'm
Yeah.
like, huh, that's a new one.
Out of focus maybe. Um,
There we go.
yeah, no, like Realization Designer is a strange title, and it's maybe primarily a Ubisoft thing.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, I was working as a weapon artist on Rainbow, made a few weapons, and then it got to a point where like we didn't need that anymore, but we needed to be working on gadgets, and um, the balancing cell was starting. So the balancing cell on Rainbow is basically a team of hugely multidisciplinary people. We've got coders, game designers, sound, VFX, animation, like everyone working on one team towards one goal of making the game better. And we needed a realization designer, and I had to find out what that was. And basically, it's a mixture of, in my scenario, it's a mixture of concept art, um, blocking out kind of rough animations, um, finding all the reference for sound, finding all the kind of reference for visuals and the art side of things. And then I personally do the 3D as well. So I basically get to be in the very initial meeting where everyone's like, okay, this is what we need to do. We want this. And the game designers say, this is what it's going to have to do. The UX designers say, this is how the player is going to have to understand what's happening. The audio people are going to be like, yeah, we'll need these kind of feedbacks for the players to understand as well. Like UX and audio kind of come hand in hand. All these different requirements fall down on me, and I write them all down. And I'm like, okay, how do we make this a reality? Because the game designer basically just wants the rules to work.
Yeah.
And as an artist, I want it to look pretty.
You're essentially a product designer. Like you're designing the product. You're designing not just the
Kinda,
pretty side of it. It's like, okay, how does this thing get packaged? Where's the sound? Where?
yeah,
How does it work? Like, you know, when you see Chris Hill do, like he did some stuff on Blade Runner, and he's like, okay, I'm not just gonna make this piece. How does the piece animate? How does it work? How does it work within the
yeah,
world? That's the kind of stuff
yeah,
you're looking at.
exactly. To me, the way I feel about it is it's less refined concept art. So there are a lot of concept
Mm-hmm.
artists who are incredible at what they're doing, but they don't really care as much about the gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I moved specifically to work on Rainbow because I loved the gameplay, and I'd be playing it in the evenings by myself and with friends, and like I was part of that. So I came here for that. And then when this option came up, it was like, okay, cool, I get to stay on Rainbow. I get more involvement in the gameplay, which is something that I was already, trying to do, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of be involved in what was happening with gadgets and stuff. So yeah, like it's basically, and I come up with all these references. I do some mock-up animations, all these stuff. But at the end of the day, I don't do everything. Like
Yeah, yeah,
I send the videos to animators and say, hey, please, can you make it work?
yeah. You're
And
kind of
then
informing them.
yeah, and then also I talk with the directors and communicate with them to make sure they feel comfortable with the way the animations are going to work, or the way like the animation director is, make sure that he's happy with it. So it's kind of being a point of contact about all of these different nebulous things, that are completely different from each other, but at the same time have to work together. So
Is so? How do you find like? I'm at a crossroads. I've always said I'm always at like a love hate relationship with game art. We're speaking a little bit about this off air.
yes, we need to talk about this. I
Yeah,
remember
it
you being like, "Oh, I hate it when games actually have to be released and actually have to like
yeah.
run on
It's
a
I
console."
think it came from when I was working with Decagon. You're working in outsourcing. You don't have You don't have a hand in the game. You're just like a tool. Make this thing for us. And I
Sure,
think the
yeah,
amount of times where you get like the amazing piece of art come back from the talented team, and then it's like, yeah, that needs to be optimized. We need to know that
yeah,
level of detail, kill the detail, and I'm like, this is frustrating. But it's just like, so there's two parts to
yeah,
this. There's that, and I've kind of come to terms with it because one of my ex colleague at Decagon, Michael Kinsey, made a really good point. He's like, part of the fun of game art is the challenge of figuring out how to get it to
yeah,
look as good as you could if you
yeah,
just
yeah,
had unlimited resource. I was like, okay, fair point, I agree. But then there's another side of the coin, which is balancing the gameplay to the visuals. Now we look at something like Valorant. I feel like the whole art style is completely dictated by the gameplay. The environment's very muted, very simple. For example, the VFX, super, elaborate, eye-catching, because you have to obviously signal to the player where the threats are and all this kind of stuff. And this isn't new. Like, this started in TF2. TF2, like, all the characters, super distinct silhouettes.
Their Bible for the art style
exactly.
of the game. Something that was referenced when my first day at uni. Like, that was one of the first things we talked about.
So you're in that realm of, like, you obviously care quite a lot about the sort of the gameplay aspect. The gameplay is very important to you. From gathering, so, like, how have you managed? Like, does that ever come up in your as an artist interacting with different types of mediums where you're like, you see a game, you're like, oh, that looks amazing. I can't see what the fuck I'm doing, but it looks amazing. How do you find that?
Well, for me, it comes in every day at work. Is like the thing that I'm thinking isn't how can I make this prop or this asset like look amazing. It's how can I fit everything together within the restraints, you know? So most of the time I'm almost designing at the concept stage, like the sketches and everything. I'm designing around what I know will be doable. So I try and avoid like really thin, small things. I try and avoid excess detail on stuff that I know isn't going to have enough poly count. And like, it's almost like the role is problem solving. And part of that problem solving is budget. And there are very strict budgets on competitive games because of obvious reasons, like running it smoothly, and you can't have one gadget which is going to tank things. So yeah, like when it comes to playing other games, most of the time, like I'm not really thinking about it too much. I'm playing the game, enjoying it. But when you talk about Valorant, when you talk about TF2, when you talk about these kind of games, like Apex is an example where Apex Legends, when you play that, like you're like Titanfall 2, you could always see the pilots when they were kind of jumping, jetpacking around, because they have a particular, like I think they have an effect that comes off the back of them, so you can notice when where the pilot is. And in Apex, they kept that, and it's longer range engagements, and so these longer range engagements have another problem of like you can just die without knowing it, and that's the thing that in PUBG is really frustrating to me. So I never really got into the game because it was the fun factor for me wasn't in sitting and waiting to be killed. The fun factor, I have other games that I would prefer to play. But yeah, there's well, yeah, that's even worse almost, because you're like, I'm just walking around, I'm dead. How? Where? What?
Dude,
why? You're like, no idea.
It's an emotional roller coaster, that game. Like, I'll play around with it, and I'm like, I need to take a break. For like, I'm drained after playing. It's so tense. It's a horror game.
Yeah. No, I enjoy the tense stuff. It's just there's certain gamey things that I think, for me personally, I want to allow gaminess to not be a negative thing, because actually it's most of the time the reason that games are fun is because of that gaminess, the ability to play within certain rules. It's just another thing that doing realization design stuff, I've been working with game designers way more than before, and so I get to know their way of talking about things, their logic, and that's been really helpful because game development's collaborative, so it's not just about pretty things.
Do you see something like Doom? When you see Doom, for me, that was one of the ones where it's like it was a breath of fresh air, because they threw logic out the window. They threw just logic. Cause it's like, okay, you're low on ammo, you'd use your chainsaw. What does the chainsaw do? It gives you ammo. Like, does it make sense that ammo bursts out of an enemy with a chainsaw? No, it makes zero sense. But they kind of just embraced what used to make games fun, just this arcadey feel. Do you think them sort of things, when you see someone like Doom, which is obviously, especially this year, like, I mean, I know the 2016 one was super popular. This year's one was crazy popular, whether that's due to COVID or not, whatever. But can you see that mindset that Doom sort of set for itself ever bleeding into other games? Like, hey, let's embrace, like you said, the gaminess of it.
I think it's already having an impact. Like, I think there are games that I'm more like we go through different phases in game development of like more things being popular, and we're kind of coming out of the other end of the what's it called, the battle royale games. But I'm not sure if the over like like the popularities, they're always changing. But within battle royale, what I find really interesting is it's not just an art style thing. Whereas before, it was kind of an art style based. Like there was the gritty realism, and then there was the bright, colorful realism, and then there was stylized stuff like Overwatch. And it's like the art style was going through um, cycles, but the gameplay was like there was no like it wasn't as much of a contrast in the gameplay.
Mm.
Now we got this kind of game, and now we got this kind of game. Um, so now I feel like it's a bit more open than it was before. Like we've got a bunch of different things catering to different people and being differently successful and differently engaging, and I don't know, it's exciting.
Is it frustrating when you see? This is something I find, and I was actually just talking to my friends this morning about this. We're talking about Death Stranding. Um, Very divisive game. I mean, it looks amazing. Is it for everybody? Absolutely not. Like, I'm not. It's not for me. I played it and I was like, I'm pretty bored. This isn't for me. Not a bad thing.
Yeah,
Like, different strokes for different folks. But it's like you get to I was looking at Battle Royale. It's like you had PUBG. Like we had PUBG, and then you had Fortnite come along, and I remember at the time people were like, "Oh, Fortnite sucks. Like I can't aim down sights. It's got random hit fire spread." And then other ones come out. Apex, you had which had like all the ability stuff, and then you had Warzone where you could get revived and come back in if you win the gulag thing. And I kept seeing people be like, "Oh, I wish it did this from this game," or "I wish this game did this from this game." And I always find that's a dangerous mindset because I think developers do listen to that stuff as well. Like, if they're making a Warzone and you're like, they really want this thing and they have that's in PUBG, like, should we put it in? And it's like, I like the fact that all these games have the little nuances which are different because, like you said, it caters to different people. But it is frustrating to see people like, and not just gamers, like developers as well, being like, this game's shit because it doesn't have this. It should take this from that game and put it into their game. And I'm like, yeah,
the
but
only
they're a
reason
different thing.
what I found really interesting lately is like I've learned a lot. I've made a lot of mistakes in the past couple of years in working on stuff. It's like feedback. The easiest way for people to feedback what they're thinking and what they're feeling about a particular feature is with the language that they have, right? And so they're not going to come to you and say, "Oh, here's a brand new, fully formed gameplay idea that I think you should implement." They're going to come to
Mm.
you and go, "I played this thing, and that makes more sense to me on this feature than what you have right now." And it's like the language in which you speak, like the not just language, but kind of like the lexicon that you have to work with varies wildly from different people. Like a game
Mm.
designer may come to you and use kind of discussion points based around pure game design, and then a programmer might be like, "Yeah, but I played this last night and this is really fun, like you should just copy that." And what they're meaning by "you should just copy that" isn't actually copy it. It is take that concept and apply it the way that it should work within this game,
Mm.
because i I like that and I think it fits together somehow. It's this thing of like communication is really hard. Like as
Mm.
much as the humanity has got better at it, and we're all able to work from home and everything.
Mm.
Not all of us, but a lot of us are able to work from home. It's still hugely difficult to mean what you say and say what you mean. Like both the concept in
Well,
your mind and the one that comes out of your mouth are different. Um, and so I think when you hear people like typing on them on YouTube comments or wherever, being like, "Oh, just copy this," they're not actually meaning, "Yeah, just copy it." I don't think anyone ever wants someone to just be like, "Copy something." They
mm.
mean, "That's a good idea, and I think it should be within this, however that happens."
I suppose you're in a pretty good spot though. Like you're able. So like I've said this quite a few times. barrier of entry to have conversations with certain mediums is very difficult. Like, for example, 3D artists. If I was to say to you, oh, your normals are converted, you need to flip your normals. If you just flip your green channel, and that will make the normals read properly. Makes sense to you. You understand what I've just said. You say that to a designer or to a programmer, and they're like, or maybe not all programmers. Programmers do tend to understand that stuff, but you get my point. There's a barrier of entry to have that conversation. It's the exact same with design. And the one thing I think I'm trying to spend, like, I'm trying to do a similar thing. I'm spending more time talking to design, because the thing I always find is, you know, when people say it feels right, something feels right. Now, as artists, our job is to adhere to the subconscious and lead players through the art, and we're not distinctly signposting things, but we are leading players using techniques we know. And
sometimes you do need to distinctly.
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes it's needed.
But a designer is, I guess, their job is to subconsciously understand what feels nice means. What things do the players subconsciously enjoy or like respond to without explicitly saying, whether it's the feedback in the controller, hit marker sounds. Like, for example, Call of Duty 4 hit markers. They're synonymous. People remember them for years, forever. The little thud sound you get.
Yeah, I remember I played Dirty Bomb when, like, way from closed beta. That game was super fun, and like the interesting thing about it was that it took the hit markers and it did its own thing with them, and it was like one of the first times I had noticed the whole, like, oh, that's from there but changed and actually worked really, really well and almost better here, because Dirty Bomb was a bit more of a like Overwatch precursor, you know, like it did the whole hero shooter thing a bit before, and it had that kind of arcadey feel, less military, less kind of a bit more fun. Fun. But yeah, like as you say, I think one of the important things for everyone getting into games is when you get your first job in the company, you're going to want to talk to the artists, because they're going to be the ones you want to learn from, or you're going to want to talk to the programmers because you're a programmer and you want to learn from the programmers. But actually, one of the key things that's helped me develop is talking to people who aren't from my field. Like, I talked to a bunch of people from wildly different backgrounds when I was at Dambuster, and it really helped me understand things way better, and I could deal with problems when they came up way better, because I talked to Code about this particular thing, and I understood why this bug was the way it was. We spent quite a while fixing Vault bugs, because if they wanted to change the whole Vault system, that would be months of work, and it was better to get 10 artists to spend 4 weeks fixing Vault bugs at the end of the project than go into this really intense, deep problem that they weren't sure how to solve at the time. And it was one of those things where it's like, if I didn't talk to them, I'd just be annoyed that I had to go around fixing collisions and placing barrels to stop people climbing, and and that helped me understand someone else and have that empathy with, okay, yeah, I'm helping the game get released by doing this thing which sucks. Like, all these types of things happen where you are a team, and often it feels like you're not one team, you are multiple teams fighting each other, and sometimes it even goes up to the top command and they're fighting each other. And at the end of the day, like, if you can talk to a game designer, a level designer, programmer, and understand the issue better, you can come up with a better solution for everyone, rather than being like, oh, but I want this roughness to look nicer. And like, yes,
the pain.
It's like, I don't care if the roughness looks bad. Right now, it looks like it's wet when it shouldn't, or like dumb things like that. But what I'm meaning is just by talking to other people from the same development team, I've learned so much. And right now, I'm in a situation where I don't have any other artists, so I'm like alone.
Well, it's funny because that's the age-old conflict, isn't it? It's designers, artists, and most of the time. So everyone I've spoken to, obviously in private, about like where they've had conflicts with designers, and vice versa. I've spoken to designers who get really frustrated with artists, And a lot of
Of
it is
course.
just born out of ignorance. It's just born from they both have goals which they're trying to achieve, but they don't know each other's goals, so therefore they're
Yeah.
battling.
It
And
may not
I'll
even
be
be ignorance. It may just be like lack of empathy or lack of like energy to provide empathy.
could be
If that
that. I
makes
mean, I
sense.
found it a lot
Like,
easy recently. I've been talking to like my designer, and I'm like, okay, I want to do this. This is what I'm trying to achieve. And he's like, okay,
mm,
I get you want to do that, but for this reason, it doesn't work. Okay, how do we achieve something which makes us both happy? Whereas I
exactly.
feel like
Yeah.
what tends to happen is people work in little bubbles on their own. You have like
Yeah.
an artist working over on one side of the room, like art in a way doing a thing, and a designer working on the other side, and they're not talking. And then at the end, it's like these two things don't gel, don't work, they don't read in symphony. And
Yeah.
then you're going, it's because you haven't talked. Like it's all down to communication, really.
Yeah. It was one of the things that bugged me as an environment artist was like particular situation I was in was that all level design were literally the other side of the building from all of environment art. And it's like that was because we were a particular point in the project and we were finishing and closing everything and like it wasn't necessarily always like that. I know that during Crytek days that there was level design and art would work closely as a unit. And I kind of hope that more level designers and artists work closely together because as an environment artist, like the other environment artist who's working on a completely different level that like doesn't matter to your level, like why are you talking to them over talking to the person who's actually like directly linked to what you're doing? So I think there's a lot of like improvements that can be made just from being open to
So I
like
have a
other
hypothesis
people.
about this. I'm curious to see what you think about this.
Okay.
I think a lot of it's born out ego. Bearing in mind we're in fields where we are
Yeah, ego
constantly
is
having to
important.
show off how good we are. Like as an
Yeah,
artist and a designer, I'm the one who designed this amazing feature. I'm the one who did the art at an amazing level. And when you're discussing ideas with someone who may contradict your idea, there's a lot of well, I want to be right because I want to make the level and have the credit for it. And I feel like that may be born out of just I want to be right rather than maybe being okay with being like, okay, maybe my idea wasn't the best. Maybe this designer's or artist's take on what I'm saying is a little bit better. I think a lot of it
yeah,
can be born out of that because this is an industry we're in out of ego. Like,
yeah.
it,
Like I've had
out
to
of,
realize that lately, like well not lately, but past couple of years. like
yeah,
like you can be an artist and work by yourself and like even working within the art team, it is possible to go through your time working in the games industry as an artist and be quite insular and be quite
yeah.
ego driven by yourself on your own, not really like problem solving with other people. But that's not what I wanted to do. But it's what I had been doing. And so when I got into
Mm.
this position where I was working in this in this balancing cell of people from massively different places, I really had to check my ego. Like I never thought I was an ego driven person, but I'm an artist and like throughout uni and throughout this like proving myself thing, like looking back on it, I was super ego driven, you know? I was
Mm.
like the whole point was to prove myself or like that prove your ego's worth essentially. And it's like lately I've been dealing with that, and I don't think I've ever had the ego be like a massive problem. You know, I've never.
Mm.
I hope, like, I really, really hope. I know that Dan Buster. Maybe I was a green young kid, and I was excited, and I thought everything had to be achieved now. Um, and like, when you're first getting into the industry, you do feel like that. You do feel like you're still like on that fast moving train of doing your portfolio and finishing and you've got it in, and you're like still moving really fast. And it's like I didn't realize I needed to just literally take a step back and just shut the fuck up for a bit, slow down, and just like
Yeah.
allow time.
Well, I think that's also because when you get into a studio, like I've said this for a long time, I did a art session course on it. It's like you your biggest spike in your development is that first few months in a studio because you realize how little you knew. Like when
Yeah,
I know what it's like when you're younger, like in your early 20s or whatever it is you decide to get into the industry. It's you have like this confidence spike. You land your first job and you got this huge confidence spike,
Yeah.
and then you get into the studio and you have the Dunning-Kruger effect. You're like, oh, I actually know nothing, which can be relieving. It can be great to be like, okay, great. There's always pressure off me. And now I just get to sit and learn. But you have to be willing to say, you need to take that step to be like, okay, fine, I don't know everything, and be a sponge and absorb all that information from people. That's quite
Even
hard
when
to
you're
do.
even when you're doing that, you can do that with like an intensity, which is basically continuing that like short-term thinking. And like this is a career. This is tens of years of your life potentially if you want to stay in games that long. Like who knows? I know there are a lot of statistics that say that people drop out quite quickly, but like if if this is your career and you're planning for it to be a long-term thing, the first couple of years you can use yourself up. And it's
Yeah.
like burnout, all these things we've talked about before, but like part of that is your kind of your drive almost eats you up. It almost kind of like
Mm.
it goes, oh, you need to achieve all these things so super, super quickly. It's like you don't. You've got 10 years to achieve that. It's fine. Uh, so like I think there's a lot of like new people that get in and their drive helps other people in this studio. Like that energy is cool to have
Oh
around.
yeah, it's good to
For that
have.
individual, maybe allowing themselves to just take a breath and like
I think the
be a bit
challenge is
calmer.
also that the sooner you're okay, we're not trying to do everything. I know that's where my initial burnout was, is I was trying to do absolutely everything and know everything. And
Mm,
the sooner you sort of go, okay, I don't know everything. I know what I'm good at. Like I remember there's a story. My old rugby captain when I was younger. He was like, I used to get quite beat. I used to beat myself up about not being the best player, and then he'd be like, he would just pick three things. Just say just three things you're really really good at. I was like, okay, these are my three things. Right, be the best at them, and like everything else, whatever. Let someone else do that. And I applied to get into the industry a little bit. It's like for example, I hate foliage. I hate foliage. It's the worst thing in the world for me. It's
I've heard
like
you say it.
fine. Yeah, oh god, I say it. So I don't. It's because I don't want anyone to hire me thinking that I'm going to come in and do foliage. But it's
Mhm.
like there's people better than me. There's people who are way better than me than foliage. Fine, let them do it. They can do it. I'll do something that they're not good at. That's the whole point of building a team, I guess. Is that
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have people to complement each other. And actually, it's funny because I was speaking about this with a colleague. You mentioned the person who works in isolation, like sort of quote lone wolf. Even them, there's a place for them in the team. You do need them people who can just you can leave them on a
There's
task on their
nothing.
own.
There's nothing inherently wrong with it.
Yeah,
It,
it's just
it's
on
like
scale it could get bad.
it's like yeah, like just be aware if that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing, and like the lone wolf vibes works within some fields of art better than others. Like as a
Hmm.
character artist, as a weapon and vehicle artist, most of the time you're just kind of left alone to make stuff look pretty, and everyone's just like, yep, that's just what they're doing over there in that corner. Like,
Mm.
like,
Yeah.
it's like we told them that we wanted an assault rifle, a shotgun, and I don't know, a bike. That's what they're doing for the next year. They're making the guns and the vehicles, and they're making the characters, and then like the environment artists, like that collaboration is super intense.
Yeah.
But the weapon and the characters, like there is collaboration, but it's less kind of intense, and there's a lot more time where you are alone with
Yeah, you're not
your.
dependent on other people, right?
Mm, uh,
So there's one interesting point I'm curious to get your take on. I haven't worked on a competitive game. You have,
okay,
so
yeah.
you can offer some insight to this. Is there a different type of pressure to work on a competitive game? So obviously, in a story-driven game, if your art doesn't hold up or your art isn't readable or perfect, it's like it's okay, it's forgivable. Whereas in a competitive scene where at one point you'll have like money on the line and people's
Mm.
careers on the line, and your art is more than just art. It has to function as a tool and work on scale and at speed. Is there a different type of pressure to building that type of art? And also, is it a good thing?
Um, so I'm not going to really talk like specifically about art because I think when it comes to competitive games, like the pure art side of things is a bit less. I don't know. There's a bit less of it than there is on like the bigger story kind of game. Like everything, it's not just pure art. Like anything you make for Rainbow is going to be impact other things. Anything you make for Valorant is going to impact other things. Like I don't know, a grenade in Valorant, the poison grenade that sets off the green bubble, like that thing, it's not just visuals. It's gameplay, it's
Mm-hmm.
animation, it's all these other things. And so it's not that there's more pressure, or it's just a different thing. And working on a live game as well, that's a different thing to working on a like a one time release game. You know, like working on a game which is coming out every 3 months, every 6 months. It's a different experience, and there are things you learn, and there's different pressures from the community as well. Like the pressure on working on a game that is a part of a big franchise that people like. Uh, like imagine the pressure on the Half-Life Alex people. Like that must have been insane. Like, but when you're releasing stuff constantly, it's a constant pressure. Like it's not one that just builds up. It's like it's constantly there.
Yeah,
So
you almost got someone chasing you constantly. You don't have that finish line to be like, and breathe, we're out of it. It's like, no,
yeah,
you've got the next week chasing you.
you have a breather, but it's a shorter breather, and you have a pressure, but it's a shorter pressure. Like it's not like 3 years and then you release. It's kind of like a rolling thing. So
Yeah.
anyway, what I'm meaning is that it's different. And when it comes to the competitive game side of like the art development, I think the main thing that I would say is that art has less say. Like it's at the end of the day, like gameplay is king when it comes to competitive games, because competitive games are pretty much just a bunch of rules that the game designers have constructed that
Mm.
allow a particular scenario to happen. And as a player, you are playing within those rules to beat the other side. And like if art impacts it, which for example, like the color maybe it's not as obvious in the map world, or like the placement, all these things, they impact it. But at the end of the day, game design can tell you, no, that doesn't work, go change it. But in like, I don't know, let's take Last of Us for example. I imagine the
Mm.
artist of Last of Us would be able to say, no, this style of building is what we want. We won't round that edge off. We want it to be a hard, like a
Yeah.
normal corner of a building. And the artist could be like, no, that's what we want. But on a competitive game, if that is causing a problem for the gameplay, the game designers say change it, and you change it straight
Yeah,
into
yeah.
theater, right? Like, so
Is that
it's different.
ever is that frustrating? Like, does that ever hurt the inner artist for you personally? Because I get it. You go to a studio, you know what you're getting in for. If you go to a Last of Us studio as a
Yeah.
designer, you get it. I will have final say. You go to a competitive shooter studio, you get it. Gameplay gets final say. Does it ever hamper like or frustrate you as an artist, or is it kind of like I get it? It's the rules I'm in at this studio. How does that affect you
Uh,
as an artist?
well, for me, like I came from working on Homefront where we were working on quite strict budgets as well. Like we were making an open world game in an engine that wasn't designed for open world games. We were like doing all these things, and I spent a lot of time finishing Homefront. And by finishing Homefront, I mean not making assets. I mean doing LODs, optimizing weapons and vehicles. So I came from that to a competitive shooter that was released in 2015 or whatever it was, I think. So the budgets were kind of similar.
Mm.
So it didn't come with the thing of like, oh yeah, I want to make a 30,000 triangle weapon. It's like, no, like that would never have flown when I was working on Homefront, and now like that would never fly. Like that's way too expensive. Um, and so I didn't really feel the change that much because they were kind of the same generation of like of technical specification. Um, So the inner artist, it mainly comes from like doing cool things, like, oh, I really want to do a really, really cool thing with this. And then game designer like, yeah, but that doesn't work. And I'm
Mm.
like, damn it. But a lot of the time, a lot of the time, it's not just game designers say, it's like there's so much more than just like one game designer. There's a whole community of people. There's a whole like uh, there's research and development of what will work. There's a user research of like what people are wanting, and so when it comes to it, there's also a huge number of years of experience of making gadgets and stuff for the game. So we're in a situation where yeah, we can be less creative than we would be if we were making a game from scratch each time.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, like we learn from those things and try and make it better and better each time to the point where I'm no longer going to suggest something that I think would be really cool but wouldn't fit. And so part of my job is knowing what will fit the game and what will get approved and what will be okay. I don't know if that kind of makes sense, but
It does.
the
You
inner,
see,
the inner artist is less of a problem to me because it's like I'm problem solving. I'm finding solutions. Uh,
hmm. It's interesting. It goes. It's interesting hearing it from your point of view how you framed it, because it kind of, the way you framed it, it almost goes completely counter against like the way I perceive things, because it's like I see it as I'd rather go way too far. In fact, I have this relationship with my art director counterplay. It's like I'll go too far with things. I'll push things way too far visually, and he's like, okay, you need to pull back a little bit and like let's just relax a little bit. Let's introduce
okay,
some sensibility back into it. And I'm like, I'd always rather go too far and then get reined in, because by going too
of course,
far, sometimes you stumble across new ideas which no
yeah,
one's considering. So, preempt. Part of me kind of want to hear that. It's like, okay, preempting designs because you know they're going to be a problem later down the line. In my head, I'm like, okay, that's a really hard way to think for me, because I'm like, what if I come up with this amazing idea that, okay, we can't use, but gameplay, it triggers an idea for gameplay to go, oh, actually, we could do this cool thing, and then you go down a snowball effect.
of course we
Um,
talk about things. Like
mhm.
I'll always suggest it within my team. Like however crazy it is, I'm gonna tell the game designers, I want to do this, and they're gonna
Yeah,
be
yeah,
like, let me think for a while because they're quite quiet people and they're just kind of go,
yeah.
no. But like when it comes to presenting stuff to like the directors and the head studio and all these things, it's like we're not gonna present something that we feel as a team will not be viable. We will only present things that we know are going to work in some way. Uh, and so, like, part of that is just having the experience of, like, this has worked for these reasons in the past, hasn't worked for these reasons in the past, and learning from those mistakes and those successes. Uh,
Mhm.
so I see what you mean, and yes, it is often fun to go crazy. Uh, at the end of the day, as I said before, like gameplay is king on this project, so
Yeah,
we're much more likely to get a prototype working and play test it to death if it's simple, achievable, and does the things we want it to do. We won't do something if it doesn't do the things we want it to do gameplay wise. Uh, but if I'm going to have to ask a programmer to do some crazy amount of work to do something and it's only for art purposes, it doesn't serve anyone else, that's that doesn't make sense.
yeah, no, completely. Um, okay, so yeah, so I always kind of talk to people when we're getting towards the end about like, oh, what have you learned from in the past? And I've said this quite a few times now, but like I'm more focused on people, like, where they're going and looking towards the future. So like for you, what's like next? Where do you want to be? Like, what do you want to be doing this time next year? And I don't mean like, oh, this is the job I want. I mean like, what skills do you want to develop and that kind of stuff.
Well, I came from 3D,
Mm-hmm.
but I've been trying to develop my concepting skills, my design abilities, my these kind of side of things. And so I'd like to think that I would have more confidence in those abilities in a year's time and be able to more confidently and competently express my ideas and then communicate them to people. Um, I think that's one thing that I'm still working on. But direction and everything, like I'm 6 years in, and I'm at a point where the future is uncertain. Like the past 27 years, pretty much everything coming up, I knew what it was, and I was gonna chase it down. Past while, it's been a bit more like a bit more unknown, and I'm a bit more open to things changing and going in different directions. No particular uh, goal that I'm striving towards, other than like continuing to learn in different areas, and one of those being visual communications.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Let's see.
No, dude. That's cool. That's it's an interesting route. Again, it's an answer I haven't heard yet. It's always curious asking these questions because I
It's not
always think of
normally
it.
to tell people that you have no idea what your goal is.
Well, no, but it's not like, you know, even just saying, oh, I'm interested in like visual design and visual language. It's like, you know, when I started asking these questions, I always thought, okay, at some point I'm going to start getting the same answers over and over. And so far, I haven't, which is it's always nice to hear. Like, you know, people have different goals. People are different. shock horror.
Yeah.
But
But
what we'll say,
that those would be the same, right? It would be like land a job or finish environment, you know. But like when you get to this point, everyone has a different way, you know. Everyone has a different direction.
yeah, you have to sort of find a new chase for yourself, I guess. Like I said early on, you're chasing the next job title because it's so linear, or you're chasing that studio. I guess at this point in our careers, it's kind of okay. I need to find something for myself now, which maybe I won't find in my linear career progression because we're
Yeah,
at the end of the linear side of stuff anyway.
there's a lot of kind of sideways and
Mm,
like specific things, and that's where the specialization thing comes in. But at
yeah,
the end of the day, yeah, as I said, pretty open to seeing what happens. I'm not sure.
nice man. All right, Kit, I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a blast talking to you. We'll say, everyone listening, remember to like, share, follow, subscribe, all of that jazz, because the more people get to see this podcast, the more they get to hear the valuable information that people like you have to say. But man, thanks for coming on. It's been a real pleasure talking.
I'm really hot now because Barcelona is warm.
All
So
right,
thank you.
see you next week, guys.